Hello guys, welcome back to my channel, and welcome if this is your first time. It's been a couple of weeks since my last video. I've had an absolute fiasco with cars. I think I made it quite clear in one of my previous videos that my Ford Focus Turbo blew up. Well, I was on my way down to Worthing in East Sussex Saturday last, about a week ago, and I broke down on the M11 on the hard shoulder for 6 hours waiting for the RAC. Long story short, I scrapped the car. It was a money pit, and I then spent the following week looking for another car, and I've actually ended up buying an absolute diamond car. Here it is. Yeah, it's an Audi Quattro convertible. Yes, it's a hairdresser's car, and my wife calls it my midlife crisis car, but I don't care. I like it, and I'm really pleased. Anyway, I digress. I'm back with a vengeance, and I'm going to be doing the Desert Island Disc thing that Mazzy started. Now there's a bit of a story to this, because I was actually planning to do a Desert Island Disc about a month ago, or about a month before Mazzy did it. He got there before me. That's fine, that's absolutely fine, but I was actually planning it for about 3 or 4 weeks before Mazzy did it. But anyway, I digress. For those that don't know, Desert Island Disc is a radio show that's been going in the UK for about 50 years or so. And, oh God, hang on, I've got a message. There you go, go away. Yeah, Desert Island Disc is a programme that's on Radio 4 in the UK. And what they do is they get a famous personality or a politician or someone that's in the public eye. They get them in on the radio show, and it's a hypothetical scenario of what would they take to a desert island with them. Now they're allowed to take 10 things, and that's 8 songs, 1 book, and 1 luxury item. Now I've thought hard about this. Oh, they also give you a copy of the Bible and the complete works of William Shakespeare. Now I'll tell you outright now, the Bible's absolutely fine. I'm not, you know, I am not a Christian as such. I have read bits of the Bible, but I'm more into Indian philosophy and etc. So we'll come to that later anyway. But I thought I'd kick this off, and we'll whiz through this fairly quick. So, and I'll give you a little backstory to each one. So my first song that I would take to a desert island is the song Montague Terrace in Blue, and that would be by Scott Walker, and this is actually on Scott's first solo album. I did a shootout video on this. This is the first pressing on the Philips label. This is in pristine condition. It's Montague Terrace in Blue was one of the first songs I heard by Scott Walker, and when I heard it, it absolutely blew me away. I'd heard the Walker Brothers, obviously, but Montague Terrace in Blue was the first solo song I'd heard by Scott Walker. If you've not heard this album, you owe it to yourself. It's a classy album, really, really good. And I highly recommend it if you like 60s stuff. But Scott's voice is just fantastic on this song. I wish I could take the whole album to the desert island with me, but I can't. So I would take just that one track, Montague Terrace in Blue by Scott Walker. So the next one is not a surprise, actually. It's a Joy Division song. And I could have chose many Joy Division songs, but there's one that really stands out for me, and it's one that I tend to go back to quite a lot when I want to listen to Joy Division. I will actually skip tracks and just play this one track off this album, and that's the song Decades. And the album is, of course, Closer. This is first pressing on the Factory Records label. This is really, really good. The actual track, there's something about it. For those that don't know, Closer was recorded at Pink Floyd's Britannia Row Studios in Islington, London, with Martin Hannett on the desk. This was released posthumously on June the 18th, 1980, a month to the day after the death of Ian Curtis. He died on May the 18th. This was released on June the 18th. It's how you remember, it's just exactly a month later. Yeah, Decades, an absolutely brilliant song. It's on the Still album, live version, terribly out of tune keyboards on that if you've not heard it. I love all Joy Division, all their albums, all two of them, and Still, to be fair, which was a posthumous album released after Ian died. But Closer and Unknown Pleasures is pretty much industry standard top drawer records. The next one is a backstory to this, and the next song that I would take to a desert island is Edie, Ciao Baby by The Cult, and that actually is on the Sonic Temple album, which just happens to be my favourite album by The Cult. I think when they made this album, they pretty much were teaching the Americans, for want of a better word, teaching the Americans how to play hard rock. This is a seriously good album. I still have memories of when The Cult was supporting Guns N' Roses at the Milton Keynes Bowl. I remember the review in the Melody Maker or Sounds or whatever it was said, it actually said something along the lines of The Cult showed Guns N' Roses how to play rock and roll, or something like that. And there's nothing more rock and roll than that pose, Billy Duffy with a Les Paul. That is such an iconic image. And I think this is when they were at their peak. They were really, they've done so many different albums and they've all had different flavours. The album before this, which was called Electric, was really stripped back with effects. It was like listening to a Led Zeppelin album, but then they recorded this, and I forget who produced it, but it was an American guy, and you can tell. But the actual sound on this is excellent. Edie Ciao Baby is a song written about Edie Sedgwick, one of Andy Warhol's superstar factory personalities, Factory Girl. She was beautiful. She died far too early. the actual song Edie Chow Baby, I learnt it on guitar when I first heard it. We used to listen to this album, my friend Tom and we used to listen to this in his, he used to have a Golf, I think, he had a VW Golf. And we used to listen to the cassette of this album in his Golf. And on a Sunday going up to the pub for a drink. And yeah, there's so many happy memories, and that song just reminds me of a good time in the late 80s when you know, I was really at the top of my game as a musician as well, I think, and I had a good social life, and yeah, it was pretty good. So anyway, next on the agenda. So the next song that I would take to a desert island is the song Gathering Dust by Modern English. Now, I used to have this as a 7-inch single. I bought it, not when it first came out, but I bought it shortly after it came out. Excuse me. A friend of mine, Barry, he had the 7-inch single of this. He played it to me, absolutely blew me away, and I went out it was about a month or so later, and I bought my own copy of it. That's since gone when I sold all my stuff in the early 2000s. But when I started recollecting vinyl, I got this. This is the 12-inch version. This was actually released after they released this album, I think After the Snow, with I Melt With You on it. They released this shortly after that to try and get some more traction on their earlier stuff. This is on the 4AD label. If you've not heard Gathering Dust, it's like indie rock. It's like Joy Division on steroids. But there's elements of Hawkwind in it, and this absolutely blew me away. Brilliant song, and a great band. I've seen them a couple of times now, and they are fantastic. They still pull out all the old chestnuts from the early 80s when they tour, and really worth checking out if you get a chance to. Right, so the next one that I would take to a desert island is the first of 2 Pink Floyd songs. As you may know, if you've watched my channel for any period of time, you know I'm a huge Pink Floyd fan. And the one song that had the biggest impact on me by Pink Floyd was actually on the album, the first album I ever bought by them. And that was Animals, and the song in question is Dogs. So I'm actually pulling out the 2018 remix. I've said in a previous video, this is my go-to now. This absolutely trounces over the original 77 mix, and it's also better than the Bernie Grunman remaster. But Dogs, what can I say about Dogs? Dogs had such an impact on me as a musician when I was growing up in the early 80s that by around about 87, 88, I had to get it out of my system, and I spent about a month or two learning the song, all the parts, bass guitar, all the guitar parts, vocals, etc. And I booked studio time, and I recorded my own version of it. And in hindsight, I shouldn't have done. It was pretty amateurish, really, for the, you know, for me. It's okay, you know. It's nowhere near as good as the version that I've recently re-recorded with a band that I was in. But to me, Dogs was David Gilmour at his peak. He uses scales in that song which are not standard blues scales. I think some of them are, you know, he's using modes a lot in that song. It's very not bluesy. If you listen to the guitar playing in that, the chord structure and also the guitar solos, they're not your typical blues. He's had to start going into modes and stuff like that to make it stay in tune. But yeah, Dogs, still a favourite of mine, still a song that I listen to regularly. When I say regularly, sort of once or twice a month I'll listen to it. Pink Floyd, a huge influence on me as a musician, growing up as a guitar player. So yeah, the next one, I couldn't do this without having a Beatles one, and there's so many I could have chosen. It was really quite difficult, to be honest, but I thought I'd go back to actually the first Beatles record I ever owned, and it was actually, I think he gave it to me or so, I can't remember, he might have sold it to me for 50p. My old mate Tom, back in the late 70s, we was in junior school. I remember it really well. It was probably our last year of junior school before we went to high school. And he sold me a copy of I'm the Walrus by the Beatles, backed with Hello Goodbye. But the strange thing about this is it was a US pressing on the orange Capitol label. Now I haven't got that anymore, so I thought I'd dig out my UK first pressing mono version. This is all intact with all the book, etc. Everything's not too bad actually. It's I'd say it's good condition, good to VG. The records are probably good to VG. You know, they do suffer from distortion, terrible distortion, these, because they had to squash so much stuff onto one side. So you get a lot of inner groove distortion on these, especially on stuff like Your Mother Should Know. Terrible. But I'm the Walrus, a great song, a brilliant song, and it's one that always reminds me of my first foray into record collecting, and I still think it's one of Lennon's best songs. I was on the cusp of choosing A Day in the Life, which is my favourite Beatles song ever, by a country mile. But you know what, I got a bit sentimental and I thought I'd choose I Am the Walrus. Right, next one. And there's a bit of a backstory to this as well, and the next song that I would take to a desert island is All About You by Thomas Lear. Now, I first heard this song on the Cherry Red compilation Pillows and Prayers. The only problem with the version on there is it's been edited. I think that might have been the 7-inch single version. This is 12-inch version, obviously, and it's extended. There's an extra verse. It is considerably longer. I think it's about 2 minutes longer. What can I say about All About You? Well, it's such a good song by Thomas Lear. It should have been a commercial hit, I think. If you hear it, you know, you'll know what I mean. It's just got that sound, an early 80s synth sound. The percussion on it, it's all programmed by Thomas. He's an absolute genius, and he's very, very underrated. Thomas Lear is still very underground, really. He's not really had any mainstream success. But this in particular is worth checking out if you want to hear something from early alternative synth pop. I wouldn't call it pop, because I always think of pop music as commercial chart stuff, but this is like Howard Jones, but a more alternative version. That's a good analogy of Thomas Lear. Absolutely brilliant, and I can't recommend him enough, really. So the next one is the final Pink Floyd track, And this one again brings back memories of getting stoned, actually. I've got to be honest, you know, back when I was 17 years old, I used to hang about with a good friend of mine. We're still sort of in contact with each other on social media, but we haven't actually seen each other for, I would say, 30 odd years. So it'd be good to catch up with him. We're trying to plan a meeting actually, but the album is I'm a Gunner by Pink Floyd, but the actual track that I'm talking about is Careful With That Axe, Eugene, the live version that's on here. And I actually think that the live version on I'm a Gunner, it's either between the live version on I'm a Gunner or the live at Pompeii version. They're both very similar, but I think the I'm a Gunner one has got the edge. It's definitive. You know, you listen to the studio version and it's over before it started. It's really fast. It's no tension building. There's no, you know, when they've done it live, they built tension in that song over a period of time. Rick Wright's keyboards are just otherworldly on when they've done it live, especially on the I'm a Gunner version. His Hammond organ playing is absolutely spectacular, to say the least. He might only be playing 2 notes, but Roger Waters' bass playing on this is a masterclass in taste, and less is more. A little bit like Gilmour, really. And Gilmour doing his ethereal scat singing behind his guitar playing is absolutely on another level. It's so good. So, you know, yeah, Careful With That Axe, Eugene, off of I'm a Gunner is my final record. And then we come to the book. The book that I would take to Desert Island is the Bhagavad Gita, which is the writings of Hare Krishna. I owned a really posh copy of this that was given to me by a member of a local Krishna temple in Romford. He gave me a really good leather-bound copy of it, and I read it cover to cover. I found it fascinating, enlightening. I'm not going to go into it. It's so big, you know. I'm not going to sort of thrust it down your throat, but that's the book that I would take. I find it very enlightening, and I think it's worth reading if you've got any slight interest in Eastern philosophy. And then we come to my luxury item. I could have chose many things. I could have chose my stereo system, but then I thought, where am I going to plug it in on a desert island? Which is quite a weird thing, because how are you going to play your songs? But it was quite easy for me to choose my luxury item. 2 years ago, my son surprised me on Christmas Day. He had heard that back in the mid-80s I traded in one of my guitars, or traded in my only guitar. It was a Les Paul copy. It was a catalogue guitar, cost about 80 quid back in the day. I didn't really get on with it at that time, and I was really looking for a new guitar. And a girl that I was going out with at the time, her cousin, I think, he bought an Epiphone Casino, and I coveted that guitar from the moment I saw it. It was the Tobacco Sunburst with a Bigsby tremolo arm, typical Beatles guitar. And after about a month of him playing it, he said, "Oh, I don't like this guitar." And I'm sitting there thinking, "Oh, that's a shame, never mind." Then he said, I really like your Les Paul. And a light bulb went off in my head. I was unemployed at the time, but I said to him, well, look, I really like your Les Paul, and you really like, I really like your Epiphone Casino, and you really like my Les Paul. How about if I give you my Les Paul plus an extra £20 and you give me your Epiphone Casino? And he went, that's a good deal, mug. So I ended up getting an Epiphone Casino in exchange for a, I shit you not, a satellite Les Paul and £20. However, later on in the 80s, 1989 to be exact, I traded it in for a Stratocaster because I wanted a Strat. I couldn't afford to buy a Strat outright, so what I'd done was I used the Epiphone Casino as a down payment, and I saved up over the course of about 8 months for the balance, and I ended up with the Strat but minus the Epiphone Casino, and I forever regretted that. I loved that guitar. I wish I didn't get rid. I wish I'd been in a better financial position at the time to keep the Casino and sell and buy the Strat, but I wasn't. I was hand to mouth with guitars. I couldn't. Every time I wanted to upgrade a guitar, I had to trade in my old one to get a better one, and so on and so forth. And the final trade to get a USA Fender Strat was to trade in the Casino. Fast forward to 2 years ago, and unbeknownst to me, my son knew about this, and he knew how sad I was about letting the Casino go. I won't beat around the bush. He bought me one for Christmas, and here it is. It's not exactly the same as what I had in the 80s, because this hasn't got a Bigsby. This hasn't got a Bigsby here. I'm going to put one on it, but yeah. And the reason I take this to a desert island is it's acoustic as well as electric, so I don't need an amplifier. And it's a gorgeous, gorgeous guitar. Yeah, and this is the guitar that I would keep. This is the one that I would save if I was running from my house in a fire, because my son bought it for me. So it's got a lot of sentimental value to it. Yeah, I love it. I love all my guitars, but obviously that one's got a special place for me in my heart. And that is my Desert Island discs. I'll be back in a week's time or thereabouts with another vinyl finds video. I think I've got a few arriving, 3 or 4, so we'll cover that then. And till then, hit like and subscribe, do all the usual stuff. Look forward to seeing you in the next video, and we'll call it a day. Thank you very much, and bye-bye.